The Great Alone and Into the Wild Inquiry Project by Christopher Dobrogowski. In the words of Andy Goldsworthy, we often forget that we are nature. Nature is not something separate from us. So when we say that we have lost our connection to nature, we have lost our connection to ourselves. I couldn't agree more with these words, and we see evidence of truth from this quote in both narratives, The Great Alone and Into the Wild. Through the lens of eco-criticism, we are able to see how indescribably important nature truly is in our lives. It determines our values, shapes our perspectives, and defines our lifestyle and behavior. We are touched by nature, and it opens us up to new possibilities and beliefs that we may have never considered before. The essential question: how does where we are influence what is important to us and what it is important to learn? When we go out into nature, we connect to the land around us. We become more observant and gain new perspectives. It isn't until we step out into the wild that we truly appreciate it and all its beauty. By surrounding ourselves with nature, we begin to acknowledge, respect, and cherish our planet, directly impacting the things that are important to us. Nature influences us in many ways. Our values and the things we learn all stem from the world around us. Being in nature, or even viewing scenes of nature, reduces anger, fear, stress, and increases pleasant feelings. Exposure to nature not only makes you feel better emotionally, but it contributes to your physical well-being, reducing blood pressure, heart rate, muscle tension, and the production of stress hormones. Interacting with nature is important not only for survival, but also for human quality of life. It is only when we are in nature that we realize what is truly important to us and what true knowledge is. In both The Great Alone and Into the Wild, we observe this phenomenon first-handedly. In The Great Alone, we see how Lenny Albright evolves after she moves to Alaska with her family, and Into the Wild, we see how Chris McCandless's personality changes once he deserts the urban life he knew and hits the open road. In both instances, Lenny and Chris undergo a complete metamorphosis by escaping the suffocation of society and life in the city and fleeing into nature. It was in Alaska and in the wilderness that Lenny found who she was. Before moving to Quebec, she had lived life as a defenseless girl who knew nothing but fear and lived as an outsider. She grew up with an abusive father, Ernst Albright, a PTSD-stricken veteran of the Vietnam War. Life had never been normal for her, and her only true care in the world had been her mother. That was until they had come to Alaska. It was here that Lenny discovered her love for nature and for others. She fell in love with a boy named Matthew, and the rest became history. The two were inseparable. Here in Alaska, Lenny learned how to depend on herself. She learned how to live off the land and how to protect herself. Lenny became a survivor. But most importantly, Lenny learned what home was. Having been controlled and dragged around all her life by her sadistic father, she had never known a home. It wasn't until after he had died at the hands of her mother that Lenny knew home wasn't a place, it was a state of mind. Home was with the people who you love. For her, home was with Matthew and their child. Chris's evolutionary process was quite different from Lenny's, however, but not incomparable. After finishing university, Chris McCandless decided that he had enough of the urban life. He wanted to find himself and find his purpose, giving up everything he knew, his money, his car, and his name. He took to the streets. After doing so, Chris adopted the name of Alexander Supertramp before continuing on his journey of enlightenment. His goal was to make it to Alaska and survive there on his own, living off nothing but the land. After touring the rest of America, he had finally made it. Throughout his journey, you can see Chris changing, growing as a person, learning, and finding new importance in new things. He finds an abandoned bus, which he adopts as his new home. Immersed by wildlife, you can see his appreciation for the world around him growing tremendously. However, it wasn't until just before his tragic death that Chris had his epiphany. To call each thing by its right name. By its right name. It's a beautifully ironic quote. After mistaking a poisonous berry for an edible one, which became the cause of his inevitable death, the line connotes more. He had been living for so long as Alex Supertramp, he had lost touch with his true identity. In his dying moments, he knew who he was. He was Chris McCandless, an aesthetic voyager whose home is the road. With all that being said, how was it that nature truly changed the things that are important to Lenny and Chris, and what is important to learn? As we see in the book and in the movie, it is without a doubt that the natural world had changed what was important to them. It was the harshness of the environment that had first made all the small things in life important. Things like having a roof over your head or having food to feed yourself. In the scarceness of Alaska, Lenny and Chris had realized how important these things were. Things as insignificant as an apple, to them, made all the difference. Additionally, Chris and Lenny both gained appreciation for the importance of happiness and well-being, which have been rooted in the serenity of nature. Living away from society without luxury, they discovered the importance of essential and necessary possessions rather than materialistic items that no person truly needs. In terms of what it is important to learn, Chris and Lenny found many things crucial, things that were ignored by the rest of society. Back in the city, the only things that mattered to learn were basic academics, things such as math, sciences, languages. However, when they left that life behind, both Lenny and Chris realized what was important to learn. It was important to learn about all the things around them, the history of the lands, the people that were there before them, the species of plants and animals, hunting skills, how to build a fire. The list goes on. These things were all ignored by the people in the cities. But most importantly, what they discovered, what was most important, was to learn who they each were as individuals. Now, what should we do? As we've seen from these two artifacts, when we go out and explore nature and immerse ourselves within it, amazing things happen. We feel better, we become healthier, we connect to the land, and we find new importance in new things. What I've learned from reading The Great Alone and watching Into the Wild is that I must spend more time in the outside world, away from the ticking clocks of the city, the flashing lights, and the busy schedules. It's what we must all do. Go out into nature to become one with ourselves and discover our true identities. Perhaps not to the great extremes of Chris McCandless, but we must all make a point to explore the outdoors more, to go on hikes and adventures, to go camping, but to only take the things we need, the essentials. Because what I've learned from these two narratives is that when we don't have the comfort of luxury, we take in more of the world around us. By going out into the world, you will experience and learn new things. Here in British Columbia, you can search a forest for hours and find new species of plants and animals everywhere you look. The more we learn about the environment, the more we will care about it and shift the things we hold important. Thank you for listening.